everyone. My name's Forrest, and welcome to Art of the News, a comics journalism exhibition. I'm joined here today by my co-host, Deb Sanyal.
Hey, everyone. We're incredibly grateful to have as our guest for today's interview, cartoonist and illustrator, Tracy Chahwan. How are you doing today, Tracy?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Just beginning in with I think a question that you might have faced so many times. How did you get involved with comics journalism?
I think through the NIB. I've been wanting to try it out for a while, and Yazan contacted me a few years ago to work on this 10-page comic about Syrian refugees in Lebanon. So I just wanted to try it out. And after that, I worked on a book called Guantanamo Voices, written by Sarah Merck. And the last one I did was a book about stories of feminism in Lebanon.
So you are a trained Alba educated artist, but you also have a family connection to journalism through your mother. How do you bring these two elements, drawing and journalism, together in your work? And have there been any dinner conversations about the changing tools and approaches of journalism across generations?
Wow, it's interesting that you know that. No, I think my mom is a journalist and a translator mostly. Like her passion is really translating literature. So there hasn't really been any link to that. I think me working on comics journalism wasn't really related to her, but I think the general climate in Lebanon, a lot of my friends, a lot of people who travel there are journalists. And I've always, it's always something that I thought I would love to do if I wasn't into drawing, that I'm very curious about, just like going on the field, reporting on a subject. So I didn't get to that point yet, but with like the NIB contacting me and working on all these different comics, it was kind of a step into this. I hope I'm making sense. Sorry. And yeah, I think a lot of people who live or lived in Lebanon have this approach on things where it's a place where so many, there's so many subjects to dig into. So it's generally very curious people who like to live there. So yeah, I think it just came a bit naturally to me. There hasn't been a discussion at the dinner table yet.
So you work in fiction and you work in memoir and comics journalism. How do you distinguish between fiction and documentary? And do you feel that you shift your style accordingly? And as a follow-up to that, is there a difference in your work when you are drawing your own story versus drawing someone else's story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my first try at comics journalism, I was asking myself these questions, like how do I adapt my way of storytelling or drawing to such a how do you say, realistic, not realistic, but it's not serious. I can't find the word. Okay, a serious subject, let's say. So with the first comic I did, the one that's going to be exhibited, I wanted to try and keep it subjective. Like the last page was more of a philosophical, the writer was asking questions about humanity or politics. So I wanted to find a graphic way to tell that through more like how do you say? Sorry, I have a problem with words today. Like an illustrative approach, not a first degree approach. So yeah, but it depends on the comic really. For instance, like recently with the comic about stories of Lebanese feminism also. I try to stay as far away as possible at like pure factual storytelling. I kind of did it through like posters. Sorry, I'm a bit lost in my train of thought, but I mean, like, I wanted to use the way in the 70s, the posters from the 70s talked about politics. I wanted to use that in comics. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
So can you tell us, I guess on that note, can you tell us a little about your methods and especially what it looks like when you collaborate with writers like Sarah Merck or Yazan Al-Sadi?
Okay, so with Sarah, she had a very precise, detailed script. So that was very helpful and easy to follow. I really like every frame she tells you, I'm thinking of this, that, this angle, this is going on. And she was very open to making changes if the illustrator feels like it. So I didn't really change anything. And also the subject, the story had a lot of material going on. So I didn't really feel like I could add something to it. But for instance, with Yazan, on the last feminist project I was just talking about, there was a lot of reimagining to do. I had to like think a lot about how to depict the 70s in Lebanon, the civil war, how to use the graphics of the time through my storytelling. So a lot of the pages actually look like posters more than like comics. And yeah, the fact that it was in a certain period, which was very rich visually, helped me a lot. And like was very inspiring for me. But yeah, that's the difference, I think, with the Sarah Merck project, which was more like, I'm going to concentrate on the characters and what's going on with them.
Tell us a little bit about your major inspirations and our artistic influences. Are there any particular graphic journalists or comic artists whose work pushed you towards trying journalistic comics? Are there any bodies of work who you have responded to or would want to respond to? I'm especially, as a reader, I was kind of drawn to the fact that some of your artwork kind of resembled and reminded me of Love and Rockets, the Hernandez brothers' work. So yeah.
No, it's funny because I didn't read a lot of American comics. I was more like in Lebanon. I think we have the influence of Europe a lot, so I was more reading. Let's say Tintin a lot, or like Franco-Belgian comics in general. But I don't know. I think naturally my way of drawing, I think maybe it's the bold line and stuff. There's a lot of indie American artists who have this kind of thick line, and of course these later became influences like the Hernandez brothers and maybe Charles Burns. I don't know, not anyone in journalistic comics in particular. I think when I got interested in journalistic comics through a friend, actually, who's an amazing artist who worked with the Nib a lot. And we used to work together a lot in Beirut. So I was like, wow, I hope I can make something for the Nib one day too. His name is Radi Hussein. I don't know. Yeah, you've probably seen his work. He's great. So I think he kind of made me want to do it at first. Other than that, I don't know if I have any particular, like, as I said, for some projects, posters, political posters from the 70s, 80s have been a big influence. I think a lot of art from that period also, but not necessarily journalistic comic artists.
Kind of following up on that then, how has living internationally influenced your sense of audience and your sense of comics as a global medium?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's because, like, I grew up partly in Lebanon and partly in Cyprus in a French school. So I was always kind of in between three languages, three cultures or more even. So when I came back to Lebanon at like 18 and started doing comics later and stuff, yeah, you always ask yourself, like, who is my audience? I don't know if that's the word, but who am I writing for? And I still don't know, honestly. I think it's important. Like, I would like to translate more, like what we do with Samandal. We translate everything in three languages: English, French, and Arabic. But it's not always easy. Like, finding the right publisher in the Arab world is not always easy. Generally, like lately, I've been writing more and more in English mainly than French. For instance, I've steered away a bit from the French. So I don't know. I just try to find, I think when I'm doing my own personal comics, maybe, or I try to talk about something that's relevant to me. For instance, now I've been doing a lot of things about being a new immigrant in the US, how it feels, how I see like the US. Like digging back into Lebanese history also, something I think when you're abroad that you think about a lot. Sorry, I'm getting lost from the question, I think. I just I just feel like this thing where I've grown up in between different cultures has made me just maybe more curious. Like, I love when someone comes to me with a project about, like, for instance, Guantanamo. I was super curious, like, it was something I had heard about briefly, but I was like, oh, it's an occasion to work on, to understand what's going on there, and to, like, this is what I love about this kind of work, just to dig into something unknown.
So what are some of the structural limitations that you feel like are plaguing comics journalism today? And how have you encountered and countered the limitations while publishing your work?
For comics journalism?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something, like, I would say I'm not as, I don't work as much in that as other people, which I was surprised that you contacted me because I don't have this much comics journalism work. And how to say, I think for me, I choose the subject kind of, there's a lot of projects that I refuse because I don't feel like I can do something purely journalistic. It has to have, for me, I have to be inspired somehow visually. Because a lot of time it can feel like homework a bit if you're not that into the subject. The ones I worked on, for instance, the scamming of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, because I lived it. I mean, I didn't live it, but I could see that while I was living there. So I definitely like wanted to depict it. But yeah, sometimes people come to me with things that I've never, like, I feel like it will be a homework if I work on it. I will just have to research and draw well without putting something from my heart in it.
And this would be a little bit similar. You said that you're kind of new as well, and you're also thinking about comics journalism. But in the time that you have worked on comics, what are some of the changes in practices, tools, and approaches in producing comics that have most attracted your attention? Do you feel inclined, either for your own interest or thanks to some of the professional demands that from project to project, to switch to some of these new tools and approaches and look more deeply into these new emerging approaches?
Like what approaches, for instance?
For instance, yeah, sure. For instance, web comics and interactive web comics, thinking about the different kind of tools and different ways of presenting web comics as not just a comics medium itself, not just a comics page to be read on the screen, but also something more interactive, let's say, something which almost like borders on the on a video game kind of an approach. And that's happening a lot across platforms.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't think I have I don't think I've experimented enough in that. I mean, like, now there's a lot of also sharing comics on Instagram, which is very different from the way you think about a comic in print, which has its limitations, but also like it can be a good way to communicate, especially with what we're living now, when everyone is separated and abroad. So I've been experimenting a bit with that, this aspect of web comics, which is more direct to your readers and they can react, etc. But I think for now, yeah, I have a preference for the print and the way the page is thought out in print. I don't know that I can answer this question. Like, I don't feel like I've experimented enough with digital myself.
And what kind of advice would you like to give to aspiring comics journalists or comic artists in general?
Wow, what kind of advice? It depends case by case, but I would say, I don't know, it is a ton of work. It's very hard, but it's also like, I don't know, it's also very rewarding. Like when I'm doing it, I forget about time and space. I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, things have been hard creatively since I'm in the US and I can't go home for a long time. And yeah, people keep telling me, like, keep doing comics, keep expressing yourself. And it's very hard because it takes a lot of time. And if you're not feeling well morally, it's not always good for you. But I don't know, when you do it, you still feel like, I feel like it's a medium where you can express yourself much more than any other. Like, okay, sorry, I'm like also away from the subject. But like, I feel like, yeah, it's magical because every way of drawing is unique to each person. Like there's like, you want, yeah.
Well, I think that was very insightful. I think we learned a lot, and we basically heard a lot about how you're approaching your work. So we're very, very thankful to you, Tracy, for sharing some of your thoughts about your work, comic journalism. Any last thoughts that you would, before we wrap up, about the medium, about looking forward? to projects?
Yeah, I would say with everything that's going on, especially, I don't know, in Lebanon for myself, I'm talking, sometimes I always ask myself, like, should I do something journalistic and, that tackles issues frontally, or should I stay in something fictional and personal? Because I think also like telling your own story can be political in a way, and it can, like, we are not just, Lebanon is not just like it's also just people. And I feel like now I want to work on something. I'm steering away a bit from journalistic stuff to work on something more personal, to kind of, I don't know, process what we've been going through. And yeah, that's it. Sorry, I hope I've been helpful. I'm really tired today.
Yeah, this has been amazing. I think with that, we will now conclude this interview for Art of News. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting.
Mhm.